It is my deep pleasure and delight to welcome back to the Our Day Virtual Dr. Sylvia Earle, Her Deepness, and welcome, Sylvia.
Great to be on board, Chip.
So nice to see you again. And this will be for the Our Day Virtual Earth Day 2021
Coming
program.
right up. Yes.
Coming right up. And we're very excited about some of the recent developments where the President of the United States is holding a virtual summit where I know on the agenda is Big Blue, the oceans of the world. So let's just dive right in and start with what needs to have happen at this date, at this late date, from your point of view regarding the management of the oceans from the perspective of the U.S. government?
Well, the U.S. truly has a leadership role. What we do or fail to do really matters, but it's the whole world that must sit up and take notice. Climate scientists give us about 10 years to do what is necessary to stabilize and recover from years of neglect of what we've been doing that has been driving global warming, ocean acidification, and on other fronts, what we're doing to the natural world generally, our life support system. We don't have an excuse anymore. I mean, go back even 50 years, but certainly 100, 1,000 years ago, people really thought it was okay to slash and burn forests, to take us whatever they wanted from the ocean. They thought whales were there primarily to serve us. How often, Chip, have you had somebody see something unusual, some kind of critter, or maybe it's an insect, or maybe it's a little sea creature? They ask you, I wonder what good this is. What good is it? As if it has to serve us in some practical, usually with a dollar sign on it. Can I sell it? Can I eat it? Is it going to eat me? Is it dangerous? I mean, all forms of life have a place in the network that keeps us alive. Most of the creatures involved with our life support system, we're just beginning to know. And many of them, we don't know at all, especially in the ocean, especially in the deep sea, where the deeper we go, the less we know, but the more new discoveries we find all the time. So the current situation is cause for, I think, optimism. Lots of problems, but never before have we been armed with a superpower of knowing what those problems are and what we can do to reverse the decline. That's the good news. The bad news is the profound complacency and the resistance, especially of those that are sort of stuck in their ways. They have vested interests, or they have habits, or they just have beliefs born of a different time. There are even laws that endorse behaviors that we need to change. We need to, well, fossil fuels. It's legal to do things that we know now that must be reversed if we are going to really solve the climate issue that we now face. For the ocean, we must rethink the policies about fish and fishing. Up until the present time, and there still is a widespread belief that the ocean is too big to fail. We ought to be able to put anything into it we want and take anything out of it that we want. But we have the evidence that is clearly showing that we've got to change what is legally being done. It's not that we don't know, we do. The evidence is there. 90% of the sharks are gone. 90% of a lot of the other big fish are gone. not over thousands of years, but in a matter of decades. What are we thinking? We're not thinking. Anyway, I could go on. I will go on, but I want to hear from you.
Well, please do. Well, I just can't help but smile when I listen to you talking, and I'm so grateful that you were there for us when we decided to start AREI, the American Renewable Energy Institute, and you joined. You were the first one to join our board. It took three of us, and you were the third one to sign up. And so, Sylvia, we've been working together now for 10 years. We've known each other for longer, and we've seen in that 10 years about another, I hate to say, but another 400 million tons of CO2 get burnt into the atmosphere. And that has impacted the ocean in many, many ways. It's absorbed much of the carbon, and it's acidifying the oceans. And I'm wondering if we could talk from the greatest creatures of the oceans, meaning the great whales, down to the smallest creatures of the ocean, meaning the phytoplankton and the copepods. Can we talk a little bit about how they're both being impacted by this tremendous absorption of CO2 into the oceans?
Right. That question comes up a lot. How is climate change affecting the ocean? I would like to turn that around. How is the ocean affecting climate? Actually, it all ties together. You have to follow the water, but more importantly, looking at life. This is a living ocean, a living planet. It's not just rocks and water. We have a planet that works in our favor because it's alive. If we didn't have 4.5 billion years of preceding history, most of it with forms of life shaping the rocks and water into a life support system, the air we breathe, with the whole network of chemistry that favors us. Well, and to realize that it's only taken us about 4.5 decades to significantly unravel 4.5 billion years of fine tuning over the ages. We've just cut through food webs in the ocean. We've dismembered this fabric of life through clear cutting forests, through clear cutting the ocean. When we know, we can see the consequences of bulldozing a forest or burning a forest. We're less likely to have witnessed, as I have, what happens when a trawl clear cuts the ocean while capturing the equivalent of the trees. We capture the fish, we capture whatever's there. A lot of stuff that just gets thrown away, the victims, the incidental losses, the bycatch in the ocean. When a forest is burned or when a forest is cut, there's a lot of bycatch there too. All the animals that lose their homes are killed in the process of clearing a forest. But we're talking about natural solutions to capturing carbon. We get it with forests. There are even, in some cases, payments being made to keep forests in place because they're so good at capturing and sequestering carbon. And of course, they generate oxygen as along the way, which we appreciate because you like to breathe. But look at the ocean. The forests there are composed of these tiny little creatures. They're so small that one of the most important ones, Prochlorococcus, a name every little kid should have rolling off their tongue, every grown-up too. Prochlorococcus generates maybe 20% of the oxygen in the atmosphere. And it's taken a long time, over literally hundreds of millions of years. These little microbes, blue-green algae, blue-green bacteria, have been doing much of the heavy lifting, but they weren't discovered until 1986. What else is really important that's out there that we have yet to kind of lift the lid and say, oh, I didn't know you were there. I didn't know how important you are to my existence. So we do know enough to know that the ocean drives climate. moves cold water, warm water around the planet. That you mentioned whales. Why are they important? Well, at the World Economic Forum in 2020, it was fascinating to hear these economists talk about how whales pack a lot of carbon. Trees pack a lot of carbon, but so do whales. And what's more, they give nutrients back. I mean, it really was these sober, serious economists talking about whale poop, but that's what it is. You know, whales dine on krill, but then they give nutrients back to the system that power the phytoplankton that feed the krill, that feed the whales. I mean, like, what's not to love about this cycle of life? But it isn't just the whales, of course. It's sharks, it's tuna, it's the krill, it's every living thing, every animal consumes something. Animals do not photosynthesize, sadly. Wouldn't it be nice to be green and just not have to worry about where's the food coming from? You just bask in the sunlight and emit oxygen, capture carbon, and everything is fine. But we're not, we're animals. We have to eat somebody, eat other animals. It's the habit of carnivores, or eat plants, or eat some combination. But then in the process of processing what we eat, we put nutrients back to the system. In nature, there is no waste. We're the ones who invented the concept of waste. We put all waste stuff in a pile, or we tend to throw it in the ocean. That's been our history. What we take out of the ocean, we think is good for us. What we put into the ocean, we think it's a good place to get rid of things. Both of those trajectories are really causing great harm to the ocean that comes back to cause great harm to us. Think of it. Yes, the ocean is affected by the changes in climate. The warming is causing coral reefs to degrade rapidly. That, in combination with dismembering the coral reefs, taking the lobsters, taking the big conchs, the pink conchs that people like to have as conch chowder or conch and chips or whatever it is, and the fish. You know, I'm speaking to you now from the San Francisco Bay Area, and there are markets in San Francisco far from any coral reef, but they're serving parrotfish that live in coral reefs, importing them from Hawaii. Harrods in London imports parrotfish from halfway around the world. Parrotfish, these are fish that are plant eaters. I applaud them for that. They take a smaller bite out of the ocean, just as when humans eat low on the food chain, we're taking a smaller bite out of our life support system. But parrotfish always give back. They give back the nutrients. In fact, they crunch the algae growing on coral, and sometimes some of that coral gets scraped up with the plant material that they're munching on. And when they do what all animals do and release their nutrients back to the ocean, a lot of it is sand, ground up coral. And the beaches in Miami, the beaches all over the tropical areas of the world are really have been processed by parrotfish, a lot of it. There you are, sitting on parrotfish poop. Oh, never mind. But it's beautiful. It's, you know, white sand, part of the way the world works.
It's absolutely amazing, and I love how you bring through your beautiful vision and understanding this incredible view of what I would call the beauty way. You know, the beauty way is sort of an indigenous concept of how we can walk in beauty and how the animals all naturally do that.
Right.
I'd like to turn the conversation for a minute to a very big issue that's concerning a lot of us these days, which is the desire of some companies to want to go and mine the bottom of the ocean to get rare earth elements. Can you talk to us a little bit about the seabeds and the life that's contained therein, and what we know, and quite frankly, what we don't know?
Well, the magnitude of our ignorance is vast. And knowing that that's really the case, we should be really careful. Put a moratorium on this whole idea of mining a part of the planet that has gone throughout the history of the ocean, certainly far before there were humans on the planet, without major disruption, or any disruptions that have occurred over time, like continents do move around. These changes occur at a stately geological pace. But we have come along with the capacity to disrupt these ancient systems. It makes an old growth forest look like, really short growth, because these manganese nodules and the carpet of the ocean floor have literally taken millions of years to form. A little fist-sized chunk of what is known as a manganese nodule is still growing. It's a living process governed by microbes that form typically around something organic, like a shark's tooth or a little bit of shell or bone. And layers are formed, a little bit like growth of tree rings, as the metals are drawn out of the seawater and deposited over time, very slowly but methodically. Manganese, nickel, cobalt, even silver, even some of the precious metals are in some areas. That's the other thing. Manganese nodule areas are different. It isn't just a manganese nodule is the same wherever it's taken out of the ocean. The composition varies because the microbes vary, and probably the composition of the seawater that is being used as a source for extracting their existence, with metal deposits as a byproduct, apparently. This is something that we should really treat this as a library. Figure out, how do they do it? Can we tap into the technique of extracting whatever it is that they're doing? Can we amp it up? My grandson is really, one of my grandsons, I have four, and one of them is really interested in this process of how do microbes actually capture from seawater these metals and sort them out. And he said, I wonder if we could have metal farms. I mean, what a concept to actually harness the power of the microbes that are doing the heavy lifting and actually sorting out what's in the seawater and disproportionately taking those elements that are deposited on these ancient nodules. Here's the other thing. It's not just that these are not dead stones. They're living rocks. They're living. Coral reefs look dead if you just look at them superficially, and you break off a piece of coral. It just feels like it's, some stony material. It doesn't look as though it's alive, but we know that coral is alive. This is on a micro scale. These manganese nodules have living crusts. And even around where the hydrothermal vents form crusts, this apparently also is in some measure driven by microbial life. There's so much we need to find out. We should not just tear through these systems in ignorance just because they happen to have some of the metals that at this point in time, early in the 21st century, for the first time in all of human history, we've been able to first access them, and secondly, justify doing so because we say, we claim, we really need this new source of nickel and lithium and cobalt and whatever else is down there, because we need batteries to power the green economy. It's a seductive message, especially when in this country we have the president saying we need to really go green. We need to have a green fleet of electric vehicles. I love that concept, but we don't have to go and destroy the bottom of the ocean to fulfill that objective. We're smarter than that. We really are.
And I'd like to interject that we can get that lithium that you're referring to and these other rare earth elements from areas outside, not in the ocean. And we can do it in a way that doesn't use child slave labor. So there are smart ways to bring the green economy forward.
And we can have oversight. Who's going to be checking up on what's going on 20,000 feet, 6,000 meters underwater? First, you have to get there. But who are the watchdogs? Who are the people who care? And here's the big thing. The mining that is now aggressively being proposed with leases being permitted, we're talking about the global commons, the high seas beyond national jurisdiction. Nations within their own exclusive economic zones have more jurisdiction. You could still say, why are you tearing up systems within your jurisdiction when it's a once and never more sacrifice? There may be other values that are far exceed just pounds of metal, just as whales have been shown to be far more valuable as living systems than pounds of meat. We have to think differently and respect the integrity of the natural systems and not be so quick to do what we have done throughout all of our history, just consume raw materials and convert them to foster our prosperity, thinking that it's the right thing to do. And at the time, it has seemed like the right thing to do, to slash and burn the forests because they're in our way. We want to plant corn or tobacco or wheat or houses or roads or whatever it is where these ancient forests once stood. And along the coastal areas, similarly, where we have taken the coastal regions and upended them to create more land in places where you want to extend the shoreline. In San Francisco, a third of the bay has been filled by scraping up the seagrass meadows that once were there and dumping them on the land to be high enough above sea level to be able to plant parking lots and housing developments. You can go into the heart of San Francisco and you can see it. There's a plaque right there on Market Street that shows where the ancient shoreline was. I mean, ancient wasn't that long ago. We're talking in the last 200 years. We've managed to sacrifice a lot of the ocean just to put buildings there. And all around the coastline of countries and some island nations such as Hong Kong, Miami Beach, a lot of that is on what they call landfill, reclaimed area. It's a mindset that we have to rethink now that we know what we know.
So that wraps us up for part one of our Day 2021 Earth Day with Sylvia Earle. And we would like to thank you so much for being here. And please come and join us for part two, which will where we'll take a deep dive into the world of whales and corals.